Hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much for all the comments. I was not expecting so many people to watch. I had to say about this topic. I thought only 2 or 3 people would be watching it, but I was not expecting these many people to come across my video and agree with me. That makes me feel a bit better because generally this is not something that people agree with. Thank you so much. On my first video, in which I explained why I'm an antinatalist, I got this really interesting comment. This person does not want to have kids, but they could not agree with what I said in the video, and they really put out some good points. I would like to answer or clarify some of the things that they commented. Maybe I was not good enough at explaining in my first video. So I would read the comment and try to give an answer to it. So they say, while I sort of agree with the idea that having kids is wrong, at least for myself, because I do not want to have to raise them in the current world, I'm not sure I quite agree with the line of reasoning she's using here. First off, her claim is that she had a really bad childhood, which caused her lots of suffering, and is why she doesn't want kids. However, why would her kids have the same childhood she did? It's not her parents' kid, it's her own. She can give her own kid a completely different childhood. Saying that they'll have this exact same one is to claim you have no control over your own actions and the childhood you provide for your child. And yet, you do have a great deal of control over that. Not entirely, but a lot of control. At least more than she's acknowledging. She even acknowledges herself that I would love my kids. I wouldn't want my kid to go through any kind of suffering. So why would she think her own kid would have the same childhood she did with a mindset like that? Most parents that had bad childhoods do their best to make sure that their own kids have better childhoods than they did. So I would like to address this part of the comment first. I gave the example of my bad childhood as an example of the suffering that I went through. And I believe that everyone goes through some sort of suffering in their lives, which makes them into the person that they are right now. I was not the person that I am right now 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, or even a year ago. But things happened in my life that shaped me into the person that I am right now. I do believe that people who go through a bad childhood become good parents because they know what they lacked, and so that they can be sensitive about the needs of their own kids. So I think if I would be a mother, I would really look after the needs of my child. So I don't think my child would have the exact same childhood as I did. But my child will go through suffering, either directly through me, although I did not intend it, or just from the world around the child. Just a few days ago, I think a week ago, a kid in America committed suicide because she was bullied. I saw another news of a boy, I don't remember when it happened, but this boy was heartbroken and he took his own life. In both the cases, the parents loved the kids so much. They were well supported and loved by their parents. Yet they chose to take their lives. Although I can try my best to be a good mother, that is not enough. My point of sharing my bad childhood is just to give an example of the suffering that I went through, which shaped me into this person that I am, which has led me to take this decision. I'll continue reading the comment. The second issue is that she claims there's lots of kids suffering around the world. This is absolutely true. However, that also ignores all the kids that aren't suffering and that they have happy childhoods. If your argument is that it's wrong to have kids because there's kids that suffer, you have to ignore all the kids that aren't suffering in order to make that point. Maybe you could make the point that there are more kids suffering than kids that aren't, and fair enough. However, you can't claim that the kids is condemned to a life of suffering just because kids that suffer exist. Because You could just as easily say the kid is going to have a happy life just because kids living happy lives exist. Another good point. Of course, there are people who have way better lives than me, and there are people who have it way worse than me. This month, there was a very big earthquake in Syria and Turkey, and so far, more than 40,000 people have perished. I saw a news of two children that were stuck inside the ruined apartment which had fallen down like a pancake, and the girl said to the rescuer, "Please take me out, I'll do anything." And she was stuck there for days. Their parents are dead. These people have a life worse than me. There are people who have it way worse than me, and there are people who have it way better than me. And it is undeniable that happy people exist. Life is not just a continuous cycle of suffering. It is not suffering 24/7. For me, it has been a few days of suffering, maybe months of suffering. Then maybe a patch in which I'm feeling good and everything is going great and I've gotten over the suffering. And then new problem exists and like a new problem starts. I think that people who are alive go through some kind of pain. The pain is not the exact same. Of course, I'm doing way better than someone who has lost their homes right now in Syria. But that does not mean that I am a happy person. And there are many days in which I feel I'm glad to be alive because that is how I spend my day. But my point of not having a kid is because I know that things can go wrong anytime. Of course, my kid will feel happiness, but they'll also feel suffering. And that is what I'm trying to shield my kid from. I can do my best for the kid. I can put my kid in the best school, give them the best education. But things happen. Either nature will come for my kid or the society will. I could get a physical deformity, I could get paralyzed, I could get into a very bad accident, and this is all suffering, which is very possible for my kid to go through. And although there are people who exist that haven't gone through the worst things that could happen, and they've had a relatively easy life, none of them have had 100% happiness all the time. Of course, I could look at the positive side and think maybe my kid would have a great life. They would have all the happiness that I couldn't have, or all the great things that other people couldn't have. Or that also might not be the case. I just don't want to take any chances. I'll continue reading the comment. Also, using arguments regarding global warming and fossil fuels doesn't make sense either, because you're not going to solve either of those by not having your own kid. Your own choice to have kids or not have kids will have an undetectable effect on them. And global warming will only get worse whether you have a kid or not. Your own kid is only a single grain of sand in an entire desert. I mean, if those are your morals, you're free to have them, but it's just not going to have any noticeable effect whether you want them or not. It's not really a sufficient enough argument against natalism. I could not agree with this whole paragraph. First of all, I think that every human on this earth makes some kind of contribution in everyone's lives. We are all interconnected. You don't have to be Elon Musk or Jennifer Aniston to have some kind of impact on this world. Many of us think that we are all alone and what we do with our lives doesn't matter. I would like to quote Marcus Aurelius. He writes in his book called Meditations. This is the first paragraph from the second chapter. It's a big paragraph, so I'll only quote the thing that I feel is necessary. We were born to work together, like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. I agree with it. Now, although I don't know you people behind the screen, so my actions don't directly affect yours, my life does certainly affect the people around me. So, I do not think that my choices will have an undetectable effect. I do think that population will have a big impact on global warming. Many people use electronic appliances, they use cars. Housing is being a big problem. There are less jobs and more people. Population has been a big issue right now, which does affect the earth. And I think everyone thinks that because their choices don't have a big impact, they just don't think about their choices. But if you think 100 people thinking the same thing, it's a big thing. So I do think that global warming is actually a very important point for not having kids, because it is not just one person or two-person and then it is done. These people, the people that I'm going birth to, will also reproduce, and then their kids will reproduce, and then it just goes on. But there are already limited resources on this planet. The earth just cannot keep up with the pace of its own regeneration and our population. I'll continue reading the comment. She also claims that it is not worth it because this isn't heaven. So she can't guarantee them happiness, even though the moment they're born, they're guaranteed suffering. However, life was never about happiness in the first place. Not to mention, you can still find happiness in many things in life. While you're guaranteed suffering, you have to work to find happiness. But for many people, the happiness that they find is worth the suffering that they go through to obtain it. For most people, having kids is one of the things that makes them the most happy, unlike anything else, and one of the only things people find meaningful in life. Like a perfectionist, she's essentially claiming that life isn't perfect, so it's not worth it. Which, that logic doesn't really apply to most of the enjoyable things in life. Virtually, nothing in life is perfect, but the lack of perfection really detracts from the enjoyment of that thing. I think this is a very good point. The person that I am right now is the result of the pain that I've gone through. I've also had happy moments in life in which I've enjoyed and just felt so good to be alive. And although I really appreciate them, I don't think that they have much of a value into shaping me as the person that I am today. So I'm really grateful for the pain and suffering that I've gone through. Because if it was not for that, I wouldn't have known the value of love, humility, kindness, empathy. I don't think I would have been able to understand all of these things if my life was all just flowers and chocolates. So I'm happy for this person that I've become right now. When I wanted to quit so many times, but I did not. And I'm here right now. I want to live a good life because I'm alive. Now that I have this life, I want to make something good out of it. I want to do something better for myself and for the society. I do agree with the fact that some kind of pain and suffering is required to understand the reason and the beauty of life. If you don't feel down, you'll never understand the value of being up. I don't wish for a life in which I don't struggle at all or I don't go through anything bad. Of course, I would love to not have any kind of suffering, but that is just not how life works. So I wouldn't want anything that is not realistic. But all that is for me. It's because I'm already here. So now I accept what life is all about, challenge it, and go through life. I don't give up. I have accepted how it is going to be for me, and I'm facing life head on. But just because I'm doing it does not mean someone else has to do it. I've gone through bad things, and then good things have happened, and then I've really cherished those good things. However, all of this is just unnecessary for someone who's just not alive in the first place. I don't need to force someone out of inexistence into existence and then be like, hey, look, you'll get all of these good things. However, you'll have to suffer for it once. If someone is already alive, it is a completely different topic. Then I would suggest you all to get into philosophy or something about how to live a good life. However, all of this is just completely not required when someone is not alive in the first place. I'll continue. The other thing I take issue with is her essentially claiming that all suffering is bad. I don't think she realizes what life would be like if 100% of suffering was eliminated. It wouldn't be as wonderful as she thinks it would be. In fact, it would be pretty awful. It might sound weird to say it, but having some amounts of suffering, not too much, actually makes life livable. It would be torture on the human psyche to have all forms of suffering eliminated from the world. With all forms of suffering eliminated, all your needs met, etc., people would feel incredibly meaningless and empty. It's like lifting weights. If you never lift, you'll grow weaker and weaker. If you lift too much, however, you can seriously injure yourself. You need to have just the right amount of weights to lift in order to benefit from the weight. It's the same with life. The complete lack of suffering is like having no weights. You'll grow weak, helpless, and meaningless, and feel like life has absolutely no meaning or purpose. Since you have nothing to pursue, it's like playing an RPG. After the boss has been defeated, you've already got max stats, etc. What's the point of playing the game at that point when there's nothing left to do? Meanwhile, if your suffering is too much to bear, you can be crushed under the weight of it. Too much suffering isn't good either. You need at least some suffering in life for life to be livable. The one thing that I want to ask is that can you choose for yourself the amount of suffering that would be on your plate? How do I control the amount of suffering entering my life? I wouldn't want to live a life in which I have no goals, no aims, and no struggles. It would be so boring. It's good to have some kind of challenge when the challenge is something that I know I have the power to get over. I would really appreciate a world in which I could decide my own suffering. But unfortunately, that's not how the case is. You gave an example of lifting weights. In this case, the muscles already exist. And you know that lifting weights is good for your health. So you make the conscious choice of lifting those weights. What if I go around making people lift weights against their own will, saying that, hey, it is good for you, so you're supposed to do that? But some random lady says, oh, but I have arthritis, it really hurts, it is very painful. And I say, but you do have the muscles, right? You have to lift the weights. Not everyone with a physical deformity wants to have that kind of challenge in their lives. Not everyone with blindness wants that kind of challenge in their life because they don't get to choose it. My kid will not get to choose it. My kid, who would be born without their consent, might not want to go through all these things. So, who am I to force them to go through this? Continuing. And again, this is coming from someone that doesn't really like the idea of having kids anymore. I think there are plenty of arguments you could easily make against having kids, but none of these reasons just didn't sound compelling enough to me. Well, I understand, and I don't think I did a really good job at explaining antinatalism to everyone. I just tried to give my reasons about it, but I completely understand if it did not resonate with everyone. My only argument is that I don't want to make someone do something that they didn't ask for. So I really want people to think for themselves. You may decide to have kids, you may not. It's really up to you. All of us have free will. But one thing is for sure is that your choices do matter. Even if it is for 10 people, we are not alone. We are all social beings and we decide the face of the future. So I would only ask all of you guys to think their life choices and not live life in an autopilot mode. Not do things just because everyone else is doing it or just because we are biologically wired to do it. I'm really glad that this was commented because not only did they just did not say that, oh, I just disagree with this person, but they listed the reasons for it. So it was easy for me to address it. So thank you so much for that comment. and hopefully I'll get better at explaining things, especially when English is not my first language and I'm not really good at articulating my own thoughts. So, thank you for watching.